Can someone explain to me which war does JD Vance think that we lost? He's trying to reassure people that Pete Hegseth will be a good Secretary of Defense, and in making that argument, he claims we haven't won a war in 3 decades. Where to begin? We have the first Gulf War, which is a little older than 30 years old, but the United States easily threw Saddam Hussein and his armies out of Kuwait. Now some, including myself, would say if you were going to overthrow Saddam Hussein, that would have been the time to do it, but failing to do so was a strategic error, not a military defeat. We then have the NATO airstrikes against the forces of Slobodan Milosevic in the former Yugoslavia. From a purely military standpoint, I don't even know how you could begin to make the argument that this was a loss. Milosevic was stopped and there were almost no losses taken on the NATO side. Now we move to the most controversial example, the 2003 invasion of Iraq. In terms of international public perception, this was obviously a loss. And there are many humanitarian arguments you could make against things that were done to Iraqis. Saddam Hussein and his armies were very quickly defeated. Now there was of course an insurgency that ensued that many view as culminating with the rise of the Islamic State. And that was horrible and terrifying. The Islamic State had millions under its occupation and held basically a country's worth of territory. But when we move forward to the United States and others' war against the Islamic State, it has essentially been destroyed. Of course it still exists in pockets that the world needs to ensure do not grow, but compared to where it was at its peak, it's not even a question. Now we move to the US invasion of Afghanistan. Now this is an interesting one. The US has since withdrawn and the Taliban has taken over, so was that not a defeat? There was not some big military defeat the US suffered in Afghanistan, the political will was lost. In none of these cases was the issue that the US military wasn't strong enough. All of the major follies of the US military over the last 30 years were political in nature. They just simply weren't military defeats.